We're going to turn now to attorney Jami Floyd and Cornell law professor John Bloom. Professor, I want to start with you. The Cycle team booked you for the show because you're an expert on the death penalty, not knowing that I'd taken your class. So it's extra exciting to have you here today. When people look
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Now, when people look at a case like this, we learn a lot about capital cases from these most controversial or incendiary trials. Do you think, for people who have been following the Jodi Arias case, that this is a typical window into the capital crimes process, or is it different in some fundamental ways?
Well, I think it's both typical and atypical. It's atypical in that it's gotten a lot of publicity. It's atypical and somewhat in the manner of the crime. But I think it's not surprising the jury's having trouble reaching a verdict. We've seen nationally that in cases where a boyfriend, girlfriend, lover kills someone else, that juries are reluctant to impose death in those situations.
Jami, let me, you got to clear something up for me, because in the video that we just saw, the interview that Jodi Arias did, she said that, you know, she thought that getting the death penalty would be revenge. Yet, immediately after the verdict came out a week or so ago, she gave another television interview where she said that death was freedom. How much of this should the jury take into account, especially since she addressed it yesterday?
Well, they're really only supposed to take into account what she said in court. What she says to us and the media and the larger public is not supposed to be a part of the evidence. But of course, this is always a concern for the judge and the justice system that these cases are so highly publicized, which gets back to Ari's question, you know, how much is a case like this indicative of the larger system? And I agree with the professor. To some extent, this case is, but to a larger extent, it isn't. A jury always struggles with the death penalty. It's a very, very difficult burden we put on jurors in these cases. When you have a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship that results in death, they're reticent to impose it.
Well, and Jami, dig into that a little bit more. You know, bigger than this case, we see that there are racial disparities in the way the death penalty is applied. We see there are geographic disparities. So we have the legal criteria for when death should be the punishment. But what are the real sort of underlying factors that are going on consciously, subconsciously, even logistically for these jurors?
Well, they're looking at whether she has a record before this, whether she's ever done anything violent before. Could she do anything redemptive in prison? Our system is supposed to be about rehabilitation, and though I certainly don't think Jodi Arias does herself any favors when she gives these interviews, she makes a good point there that the system is supposed to be about rehabilitation and not retribution. And even the death penalty is supposed to serve a purpose. It is supposed to be for the worst, most horrific crimes. And we think about those who've not received the death penalty. And the professor can address this better than I can, but there are certainly those out there for all kinds of reasons, procedural or because of the arbitrariness of the penalty. We think of Jeffrey Dahmer, BTK, Charles Manson, people who've avoided the penalty over the years, either because it was not available at the time that their crime went down for constitutional reasons, or simply because it was not imposed by a jury. Cases, and then there are those who did receive the death penalty. Of course, Timothy McVeigh comes immediately to mind. A very, very different kind of case than this one. So the arbitrariness is what you're pointing to, and that's, I'm sure, weighing upon the jury.
Well, John, I wanted to ask you more about your project, the Cornell Death Penalty Project, not just because I, too, went to Cornell, but because I'm fascinated by it. You say this happened as a result of the closing of some death penalty resource centers, and I'm particularly interested in what you guys talked about at one of your symposia on religion and the death penalty.
The Cornell Death Penalty Project does a couple different things. We do academic research about the death penalty, and we also do some appellate representation. But the symposium you talked about, we looked at the different ways in which religion influences the imposition of the death penalty, and we looked at jurors' beliefs and religious beliefs and how that related to their ability or willingness to impose death. We looked at religious arguments which are made in capital cases and how that can skew the jury's decision making, and a number of other facets of religion and capital punishment.
That is fascinating. I would absolutely just love to see some research on that. I think the work that you guys do over there is really cool.
Thank you.
Excellent. Jamie, John, thank you very much.